Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing the next in my Halloween themed build lineup. We are doing, well, a witch. Not gonna lie, I kind of started running out of ideas for these Halloween videos real goddamn quick. However, I do have quite an interesting little setup here. Now, I will say this isn't probably one of my strongest builds I've ever made, but I feel like this is more of a team player, less built for combat, more built for just general gameplay, exploration, and kind of interesting interactions with the world, more so than just straight up being a blaster caster or some sort of combat machine. However, we are still going to have a lot of utility in combat that is able to help our teammates, but I definitely wouldn't recommend this for a lone wolf build or something like that. Thought I'd just get that out there before we get started. So, first up, we are going to be a Sorcerer. Now, the reason we want to go with Sorcerer is for a few particular things. Number one is Constitution saving for a proficiency. We absolutely want to grab our hands on that, because some of our concentration spells are quite important to this build, and we are going to want to be able to maintain them as easily as we can. As for our cantrips, I've just decided to grab Friends, because I'm kind of envisioning this witch character as, obviously, while we do have a more traditional green-skinned, you know, like Wizard of Oz, whatever it is, looking witch, I do kind of picture this as being a sort of fey creature, a bit similar to characters like Auntie Ethel or something like that. So I feel like this kind of witch, while also being your type of witch that brews potions and casts curses and has little animals with them and all that sort of thing, little familiars, this is also going to kind of be a very charming, coercive, and pulling people into deals type of witch, if that makes sense. So a cantrip like Friends is literally perfect. It gives you advantage on charisma checks against non-hostile creatures. We're also going to be grabbing Poison Spray, Acid Splash, and Bone Chill. These are just kind of these spooky spells, with Poison Spray and Acid Splash in particular being very, very on theme. And this is literally just kind of like your bubbling cauldron potion magic type deal, if that made any sense at all. Now, as for our spells, we're absolutely going to be wanting to grab Mage Armour. We're not going to be getting unarmored defense in any single way, so having Mage Armour, because we're wearing robes, is going to be super, super important. And next up is Ray of Sickness. This is going to be one of our main damaging spells. It does poison damage, and this build does interact quite a lot with poison. And finally, for our subclass, we absolutely want to go with Storm Sorcery. I did originally consider Draconic to go for the Dragon Ancestor, which is, where are we? Green, to get Ray of Sickness. Or maybe, what's another acid one? Yeah, maybe something like that. But mainly the green one. But I, in the end, decided to go with Storm Sorcery because a huge part of the identity of these witch characters in this sort of vein is the ability to fly on their broomstick. So being able to fly after casting a leveled spell right away at level 1 is super, super important, and I wanted to pick that up straight away. As for our ability scores, they're gonna get a little bit funky, and like I say, this isn't like a combat optimized build, this is just more of a fun, interact with the game in unique ways type build. So our charisma is obviously going to want to be our highest stat at 16, but we're also going to want to be grabbing a decent chunk of constitution, but not a lot. We're only going to be grabbing 12. This is because we kind of care about other stats more. Because if we have our dexterity at 14, we're going to get decent AC with Mage Armor, but feel free to swap these around if you like. But I'm personally going to be going with 12 Constitution, because this isn't meant to be a frontline fighter. This is a squishy caster type build. So where are the rest of these points going? Well, I want to put them as a 12 in Wisdom and a 12 in Intelligence. Or maybe... hang on. Might be able to adjust some things. Oh yeah, we can go... I must have messed something up here. Never mind. We can go for a 14 Dex, 14 Con, 12 Intelligence, 12 Wisdom, and 16 Charisma. This is a pretty good setup overall. This is going to give us pretty much everything we want in this build. A little bit of health, a little bit of AC, our main spellcasting stat at the usual level we want it, and a little bit of extra in both Intelligence and Wisdom. We are a conniving, cursing, charming witch. We want to be able to do all this different type of stuff. And so having these stats kind of balanced all around is going to let us do that. Now, as for our skill proficiencies, these are actually going to be quite important. I have built this to be a Dark Urge character, literally for one specific thing, and it is Medicine proficiency. We can't get medicine proficiency starting out as a sorcerer, but we absolutely want it, and with that, plus our little bit of wisdom that we have, we're going to have decent medicine checks, which is what we're going to want for a feature we're going to get later. If you've been on this channel before, you probably already know what it is, but like I said, we'll get into it. We're also going to be getting perception and stealth because I made this a wood elf because that was kind of the closest of like a fey type creature I could really think of. So having a wood elf is pretty good, getting stealth and perception for free. We're also going to be able to grab deception and persuasion. Again, if we're this charming kind of beguiling fey character, having these two is pretty important. Alright, at level 2, we're immediately going to be doing some multiclassing. Now, the way I'm going to show this build off is I'm going to be kind of showing the classes that we multiclass into that we take less levels of, just to get some quick early features, and then our main class that we're going to be using after that. But of course, take these levels in whichever way you want, and if there is a specific multiclass that has features that we grab that you don't particularly care about, feel free to just drop those levels entirely and put them into either Sorcerer or our main class. It's entirely up to you. So first off, you probably saw this coming, we're going to be going with a wizard to start. This is going to give us a few interesting things, like some cantrips. Now we are kind of, well, not really dumping intelligence, but it's not our strongest stat, so we definitely mainly want to grab utility spells here. I'm going to recommend Minor Illusion, Mage Hand, and either Blade Ward or Dancing Lights or Light. One of these kind of utility cantrips is really going to help. I'm going to personally take Blade Ward since we are a bit squishy, so getting that resistance in certain situations might be helpful. We also get to prepare 6 different spells, and I mean the first one is quite obvious. We want to grab Shield, absolutely. When you're about to be hit by an enemy, you increase your armor class by 5 and you no longer take damage from magic missile. Now the second one you might think is obvious is Find Familiar, however we are going to be getting a version of this that's a bit different later on, so there's no reason to grab it here. So as such, I would actually grab Disguise Self. I feel like in the typical Fey style, being able to disguise yourself and hide your true form in order to be able to make your deals and packs is definitely the way you want to be going with this kind of build. Next up, I think we just grab all of our utility spells. Enhanced Sleep, Longstrider, and Featherfall are all going to be useful in certain situations, and because Wizard is a prepared spellcaster, you can swap these in and out whenever you need them, so they're not really being wasted. Next, and finally, I would have Grease. You just spilled your cauldron all over the floor, and well, those adventurers might not see that coming. As for our prepared spells that we're going to take, we only get 2 at this point, but so we are going to just have Shield and Disguise Self. Next up at Wizard level 2, I am absolutely, you knew what this was going to be. We're going Transmutation. It is literally the potion brewing subclass. It is perfect for a witch. I remember I said, like, when I first used Transmutation Wizard, all the way back in, oh god, what even video was it? It wasn't my Phantom Trickster, was it? No, it was before that. Surely. Either way, it doesn't matter. Basically... With Transmutation, it is probably the least popular subclass to go with, but for me, it is one of my favorites. We're going to be able to get Experimental Alchemy, meaning that if we could succeed a DC 15 medicine check, which we now have proficiency in, because of our background, you can brew 2 alchemical solutions instead of 1 when combining extracts. That basically means when you make an alchemy potion, you get 2 instead of 1, which is super, super powerful. Basically picking up all the alchemical ingredients that we find along the way, shoving them all into our big witch's cauldron, and making some of the most dastardly brews, elixirs, and grenades you've ever seen. Absolutely awesome for a build like this, really, really feels on theme. We're also going to be able to grab a couple of extra spells from this point, and you can grab Magic Missile here. I'm pretty sure it'll work just fine with this setup. If you want another range damage option, but I also recommend either False Life, or Fog Cloud, that's what I meant to say, or maybe even something like Tarsius, although with our spell save DC being a little bit low, it's probably not worth it, so I'm probably going to grab Fog Cloud here. The cauldron gets a little bit steamy, and yeah, I quite like that setup. And now we're going to be leaving Wizard. We don't want to stay here for too long, so we're going to be moving on into our next little multi-class, and this is probably the one that I would absolutely say you can drop if you don't want to use it, but when I thought of it in the case of it being on theme and kind of adding a ton of interesting utility and different ways to kind of interact with the world, I really wanted to include it. So we're actually going to go with Druid here. I feel like sort of a Fey witch type character. Being part Druid actually does work quite well thematically. We're going to be able to grab 2 cantrips. Now, I would recommend Shillelagh, however, since our Wisdom modifier is actually lower than our Dex modifier, I don't really recommend it, since it would actually kind of make our attacks a little bit worse with our quarterstaff here. However, I really don't recommend you start going and trying to bonk people on the head with this thing. You are a ranged caster. Let the others in your party handle close quarters combat. And since we already have Poison Spray, I'm just going to recommend our 2-star cantrips here, Guidance and Resistance, just for their overall utility and how they come up in a lot of different situations. We're also going to get 2 spells at this level, and, well, we kind of already have a lot of the utility spells that we would normally get already, so I feel like grabbing something like Speak with Animals to be able to communicate with your animal familiars that you send about on various nefarious tasks, and just animals in general. It's a really nice dialogue option kind of cantrip, that kind of spell, but doesn't actually, that is a ritual, so it won't cost you any spell slots. Also, Goodberry, I mean, it's a useful spell. It's really fun. You always have camp supplies and, you know, a little bit of extra healing. And I feel like you being able to kind of produce some sort of cursed fruit, almost a bit like the poisoned apple from Snow White or something, is actually kind of cool. So I quite like grabbing Goodberry here thematically, but anything else here probably would work. Just remember that because of our lower wisdom, spell save DCs are going to be a lot easier for your enemies to make, so don't really go for things like maybe Fairy Fire or Entangle or something like that. But a healing spell or two would not go amiss. And now we're going to be at our 2nd level of Druid, and, well, you have some options here, but because we're mainly here for the ability to wild shape. And, of course, one of the more niche kind of wild shape forms is the cat. I don't know why, but as soon as I thought of the idea of a witch being able to polymorph into a cat, to be able to skulk around and, like, move around the city of Baldur's Gate and, you know, undetected and, like, sneak around and just have all that utility of being able to go into small spaces and yada yada yada, I just really, really liked the idea, and I thought I have to grab it. But, of course, for your, you also gain, like, things like the wolf, the spider, the badger, and, like, if you go with Circle of the Moon, you'd also get a bear transformation and the ability to heal. Basically, what that could provide is, say, if you went Circle of the Moon, you could basically say, like, I'm all out of spell slots, but I'm not out of options, and then just transform into a fucking bear. Or, like I say, use the cat for interesting interactions with the world. You could also go for Circle of Spores. You would still get our main cat transformation, but you would also gain Symbiotic Entity and Halo of Spores. Now, Symbiotic Entity obviously works with weapon attacks, not spell attacks, so you're not going to be getting that extra necrotic damage, but you will get that little bit of extra temporary HP, and you would get the ability to do a little bit of extra necrotic damage as a reaction every turn, but it's entirely up to you. This isn't necessary. You would also gain the Bone Chill cantrip, but we already have it. You could also go with Circle of the Land, which would give you natural recovery, meaning you could recover a level 1 spell slot with the amount of wizard levels, druid levels we will be taking. So with your, like, wizard arcane recovery and your druid natural recovery, you will be able to kind of reuse more level 1 spell slots, giving you more spell casting overall. And you would also gain an extra cantrip, but we don't really need any of these. So I could personally recommend Circle of the Moon. While its use cases would be niche with the lower levels of Druid that we're taking, we're only going to level 2, the bear form might still be useful. So I would probably go with Circle of the Moon, but I could absolutely see a case for Circle of Spores. It's the one I used in my testing, and it definitely had a little bit of utility, but not really as much as the usual. So I think I'm going to go with Circle of the Moon here just for that little bit of extra with the bear transformation, just to have that little bit of extra tankiness in a rough situation. We're also going to get an extra spell at this point. I mean, take whatever you like. I'm personally going to grab Create or Destroy Water. We are a Storm Sorcerer after all. Although we're not going to be getting any powerful lightning spells with this, you definitely need water to kind of fill up your cauldron. So, you know, it makes sense here, and you can get a lot of utility out of it if you have other people in your party who can deal lightning or cold damage. Now that is all of our little small dips into multiclassing done. Yes, it's a lot, and obviously dividing ourselves this much is going to cause some issues with power building. You are not going to be as strong overall, so if you want to just kind of go with, like, maybe Sorcerer and this next class I'm going to show off, which is our main class, feel free. Or if you want to take the levels in our main class first and maybe grab these later, you can. Or if you want to drop the Wizard or Druid levels and just go with Sorcerer in our main class, you can do any of that you like. It's entirely up to you. I just wanted to show off all the kind of cool thematic things you can do with these little dips into multiclasses, so you can mix and match as you like. You may feel like you maybe want more levels of Druid and maybe go further in that, maybe Circle of the Land for more spells. Entirely up to you. But let's get into our main class now, and you saw this coming, I'm sure. We are a Warlock. This is the Dark Spellcaster class, and yes, obviously the issue comes up that we're going to have limited spell slots as a witch, but because we've actually multiclassed into 3 different full casters, we actually have level 3 spell slots already, even with our multiclassing, so you're not actually going to be hurting for spell slots that much with this build. So, With our Warlock, we're going to be getting some cantrips, and obviously we're taking Eldritch Blast. I mean, this is going to be probably our main source of ranged damage outside of our poison spells, so we definitely want to pick this up as a strong utility option. And we have pretty much all the other cantrips here, so we have to go with True Strike. The absolute worst spell in the game by a long mile. However, I believe I said this in a previous video, I can't remember, but I am actually going to try and see if I can make a True Strike build to see if there's any way to salvage this Dumpster Fire. A commenter left a suggestion that one of the Mind Flayer powers actually does have a utility with True Strike, so I'll be interested to see how if I can get this working. So we'll take True Strike for now because it's literally our final option. And now for our subclass. I mean, again, you probably saw this coming. I've been saying it a bunch of times in this video. This is a Fey character. We are going with an Archfey. This is going to get us 2 spells we can grab here. And I absolutely want to grab Fairy Fire and Hex. It says we already have Fairy Fire. It's because it's from our prepared spell list from another class. However, we are going to want to grab it here because the spell save DC is going to be higher with our Charisma. So with Fairy Fire and Hex, I feel like these are 2 very, very witchy spells. Fairy Fire basically is going to allow your whole team to attack with advantage, and Hex, I mean, witches literally hex people. How could I not take this? And I suppose I should address the elephant in the room. There is the spell Witch Bolt. Please don't fucking take this. Yes, it has witch in the name, but it is so goddamn bad. Seriously, do not bother. Next up at Warlock level 2, we're going to be getting a little bit of a bump to our Warlock spell slots. We now have 2, and we're also going to gain some Eldritch Invocations. Now, you have a few options here. I'm personally going to be taking Agonizing and Repelling Blast, just because we are going to be using Eldritch Blast quite a bit with this build. However, there are some interesting options. If you don't want to take Mage Armor as a Sorcerer, Armour of Shadows works here. You can also grab Beast Speech if you don't want to go for those Druid levels. Beguiling Influence, which is kind of useless since we already got this for Sorcerer. Devil's Sight if you want to do the Darkness Devil's Sight combo, which we probably will later on, but we might grab this at level 5. Fiendish Vigor if you want False Life. Mask of Many Faces if we didn't grab Disguise Self earlier, which you should have. One with Shadows, don't. And Fee for 5 Fates. I mean, yes, it's kind of hexing your enemies, but I also wouldn't really take this one. I don't find Bane to be as useful as something like Bless, so I think we should just stick with our Eldritch Blast kind of invocations here, and maybe grab Devil's Sight a bit later. We're also going to get another spell at this level, and Sleep actually feels like it'd be quite good. Getting a Sleeping Potion, put Snow White to sleep. I keep saying Snow White, there wasn't even a witch in that film, it was like someone else. I haven't seen that movie in a very long time. The most I know about Snow White is from Kingdom Hearts, okay? And I know that it's like a cultural faux pas, but whatever. I'm going to grab Sleep here. Next up for our Warlock levels, we're going to be upgrading our spell slots to level 2. And as such, we're also going to be able to grab level 2 spells. Now, you can take whatever you like here. Again, I'm going to be grabbing Darkness because I want to do that Darkness Devil's Sight combo. But anything will work here. Enthrall, Crown of Madness, Hold Person, Invisibility, Mirror Image, Misty Step, Phantasmal Killer. These all work really well. Hell, even Armour of Agathis and Arms of Hadar. Grab whatever you like here. It all really works. In fact, even Calm Emotions would be on theme as you're trying to, like, charm and, like, bring people towards you. So calming them down when they're, like, you know, getting angry at you, that works. But yeah, I would definitely grab Darkness here to start. It is probably going to have the most utility overall. And we're also going to get a Pact Boon. Now, I'm going to be choosing a Pact here that I can't remember if I've used before. I might have. But we're going with Pact of the Chain, because this is how we're going to be getting our Witch's Familiar, which can be, you know, something more standard, like a spider, a cat, or a crow. But we can also get things like an imp or a Quasit, which feels quite on theme, so I'll be quite happy to grab these here. Although still, I might just go with a cat. Oh, could you imagine? Like, you have a fine familiar cat, and then you have, like, your wild-shaped druid cat. Oh, I should do a build, like a full party build that is just nothing but cats. It would be totally useless, but it would be fun. I might do that later. We'll see about that one. Next up at Warlock level 4, we're going to be grabbing our first feat, and, well, we're hurting for feats in this build. We need to bump up our main spellcasting stat. There's really not really much wriggle room with this one unless you think you can get creative, but we absolutely want a Charisma at 18 here at least. We're also going to get another level 2 spell at this point, and again, this is kind of a choose your favorite situation, so many of these would work. We are going to be getting Misty Step later on, so while it is a powerful spell to have as a utility option, we're going to be getting an interesting version of this later, as well as some versions of it from items, so we don't actually really need to grab it here. Something like Hold Person or Crown of Madness works really well. I quite like Phantasmal Killer, even Ray of Enfeeblement feels on theme, but I think I will grab Hold Person since this is kind of a supporting build most of the time. It's not a frontline fighter. Being able to give your other companions a bit of a chance to hit, including your summoned familiar, would definitely work out quite well here. Next up at Warlock level 5, we're going to be getting our Deepened Pact feature, meaning because we are a Chain Warlock, our Familiar is going to gain an extra attack instead of ourselves, which is perfectly fine. As for our spells, we now have access to level 3, and the obvious thing we can see here is Grant Flight, again flying on a Witch's Broom, but because we took levels in Storm Sorcery, you may feel like this is a little bit redundant, but you can still grab it here if you want that extra bit of flight. However, I'm personally going to be taking Hunger of Hadar, a little bit of Cold, a little bit of Acid. I don't know, I just feel like I quite like this spell, it's on theme, and we don't get to take it very often. So yeah, I feel like grabbing this here is quite nice, but obviously anything will work, like Counterspell, Blink, Gaseous Form, Hypnotic Pattern, Plant Growth, all of these will work. Also, we're going to be getting another Invocation, and I am going to be grabbing that Devil's Sight for our Darkness Devil's Sight combo, as I said before. And finally, well, not finally, I mean, we're still at Warlock, we've still got a couple of levels to go, but we're at Warlock 6. And we're going to be getting our main subclass feature here, Misty Escape. Upon taking damage, become invisible. On your next turn, you can cast Misty Step, though this will break your invisibility. Now, this used to be bugged. When this ability triggered, it actually used to break concentration from your spells. It doesn't do that anymore. Patch 3 has fixed this, but it was one of the main reasons I avoided using this subclass in the past as much as I could. But here, this is quite good. Like, someone goes to smite down the evil witch, and all of a sudden they disappear, and the next thing they know, they've got poison running through their veins from a ray of sickness across the map. So I actually really like this feature. It feels very, very much on theme, so I wanted to grab it here. We're also going to be getting another spell at this level, and like I say, you can grab Grant Flight, but I also quite like Counterspell as an option, and I think I will take it here. Being able to shut down other spellcasters is super useful on a build like this. And finally, at Warlock level 7, we're going to be getting another Eldritch Invocation, as well as some level 4 spells. And you can take whatever you like here. Greater Invisibility would be a very good option, although we're not proficient in stealth, so it may not last as long as you would think. Because for those of you who don't actually know how Greater Invisibility works, basically you do become invisible, but this invisibility does not break when you do an action if you succeed a stealth check, and these gain harder with each subsequent check you have to make. I do plan on making a full build around Greater Invisibility, bumping up our stealth checks as high as they can go, so you could potentially stay invisible for the entire duration of the spell, which would be super powerful. But we'll see with that for now. But I personally recommend Blight. I think this is just a really powerful, quick nuking option just to get that big chunk of damage out, and I feel like it works quite on theme. It is a full-blown Witch's Hex that immediately causes some damage to the enemy. Also, we're going to be getting another Eldritch Invocation, and take whatever you like here, it really doesn't matter. I'm actually going to be grabbing Sculpture of Flesh, because being able to hex and curse a creature to turn it into a sheep feels so on theme for a witch, it's comical. So I absolutely want to grab Polymorph here from Sculpture of Flesh. Although Book of Ancient Secrets and Dreadful Word would be my secondary picks. And that is the build. Basically what we get from this overall is a ton of unique and interesting ways to interact with the world around us between Wild Shape, our alchemy, and our various different spells and features, and our ability to fly. We get a ton of unique and interesting features that all feel on theme for a witch type character. I don't know what this status condition is. Temporary hit points. Oh, okay, cool. I believe that comes from Ethel. Speaking of, we are in, like, the little witch's abode here, quite literally. We've got our, witch coven sister over there, so I thought this was kind of like a nice, unique little setup for this build. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into the equipment. So we've got quite a few bits of interesting equipment here that I tried to use to capture that witchy feel. Let's start off with the hat. This is the Cold Brim hat. There are a few kind of hats in the game that give that witch's hat feel, but they're all very specific. They're things like the Hat of Fire Acuity and all this stuff. But this is the Cold Brim hat. Once per turn, any condition inflicted on the target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. This build is quite good at delivering standard conditions like Poisoned or Prone or Hex or something like that. So being able to stack this little kind of somewhat unique buff, this is one of like 3 pieces of equipment that can inflict this status effect. Anyways, the affected entity has disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, pretty cool. When there are 7 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a constitution saving throw or take 1 to 4 cold damage and become frozen, and for those of you that don't know what that does, it basically makes the target incapacitated. On a successful save, it only takes half damage, afterward the frost slows away and it is removed by the burning status condition. So basically this just means that since we're going to be dealing other conditions for free with things like poison spray, with like grease if you knock them prone, the main thing being Ray of Sickness over here, which I can't see on this spell list for some reason. That's odd. Did I forget to take it at some point? Okay, I was meant to take Ray of Sickness at some point. I might have forgotten. Whoops. Anyways, there's also conditions like our Fey Presence ability we can use to Charm or Frighten. Technically, True Strike counts as a condition, so that might work with this hat. But yeah, obviously, where did I forget to take? That's so strange. Where did I forget to take? That's going to bother me now. Right, I was meant to take it as our Sorcerer spell. I've accidentally grabbed Chromatic Orb instead of Ray of Sickness. Please pick up Ray of Sickness instead. That's what I meant to grab. That's strange. I could have sworn I did that. Anyways, my apologies for that little tangent. Next up is the Deathstalker Mantle. This is just something we're going to get for free for playing a Dark Urge character anyway, so we might as well pick it up. It lets us turn invisible after killing an enemy, which will work for a build like this quite nicely. But if you don't want to be a Dark Urge, we can go for the Flash Melter Cloak, basically meaning that whenever a creature deals melee damage to us, they take a little bit of acid damage, which also works. Next up is the Potent Robe. You can get this in Act 2, except you can't get it. Whoops. I just realized I made a mistake with this build. I've made a few mistakes with this build today, but we're keeping it all in, no editing. I initially used a Potent Robe, but I just remembered you got this from Alfira, so you can't actually get it in a Dark Edge playthrough. Whoops. So we're actually going to be going with my other alternative, the Poisonous Robe, instead. When the wearer casts a spell that deals poison damage, it deals an additional 1 to 4 poison damage. You can, if you don't want to play a Dark Urge with this though, the Potent Robe is a super, well, potent option. Your cantrips deal additional damage equal to your Charisma modifier, which is super, super good. And at the beginning of the wearer's turn, the robe activates, granting them temporary hit points equal to their Charisma modifier, and you're also going to get a small buff to your Armour class. So basically, if you're playing a Dark Urge character, run the Deathstalker Mantle with the Poisonous Robe. If you're not, run the Potent Robe with the, what's this called? The Flash Melter Cloak instead, to kind of get, so it's up to you if you want to play like a good aligned witch or an evil aligned witch. Just remember that if we're not playing the Dark Urge, we don't get that medicine proficiency, which isn't 100% necessary, but it is useful for our, you know, what's it called? The alchemy. There we go. We're also going to be rocking the Braces of Defense. These are quite easy to obtain in Act 1, and since we're not using armor or wearing a shield, it's going to give us a +2 bonus to our armor class, which we desperately want, because, you know, our armor class is quite low. But if we quickly throw up Mage Armor, it bumps up to an 18 overall, which is still pretty good. And finally, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, a pretty easy kind of setup to grab in Act 1, allowing us to grab Misty Step once per short rest, and also cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip on grease or ice. Like I say, this is just a really powerful option you can get in Act 1, and is always one of my go-to footwears when I don't really know what else to grab. But like I say, this build's a little bit all over the place, so I would mess around with it as much as you like. We'll see. Also, for our weapon, we have the Staff of Crones. You can find this in one of the rooms behind RTFL's boss fight. This is going to allow you to cast Ray of Sickness once per short rest, so you do have it anyway. And also, it's just definitely a good-looking staff overall for a build like this. But if you want to swap to something else when you get into the later game, we have the Hollow Staff. It has a similar type of look, but with a bit more of a magic-y vibe to it. This creatures have disadvantage on saving throws against your necromancy spells. Basically mean when you cast your Ray of Sickness, which you should take over Chromatic Orb. I can't believe I made that mistake. You're going to want to... this will give them disadvantage to save on the chance to be poisoned, so that means you're going to be poisoning your enemies quite a lot with this. You're also going to be able to cast Arms of Hadar once per long rest, which is just a little bit of an extra spell. So yeah. Oh, the accessories, my apologies. The Spellcrux Amulet. As always when playing as a Warlock, I cannot recommend this enough. This gives you can get this in Act 2 quite easily, and it lets you replenish a spell slot of any level once per long rest as a bonus action. Since we do have limited higher level spell slots, with our level 4 spell slots being the max as our Warlock, having this to be able to give you effectively 3 spell slots is really, really powerful. We also have the Ring of Mental Inhibition. When a foe fails a saving throw against one of your spells or actions, that being Ray of Sickness, they gain Mental Fatigue for 2 turns. Has a -1 penalty to Wisdom, Intelligence, and Charisma saving throws for every turn remaining. Pretty good. And finally, the Poisoner's Ring. This is going to allow you to cast Virulent Venom. Point your ringed finger at a target to make it vulnerable to poison damage. This lasts for 10 turns, meaning now all of your poison attacks are going to do double damage while this is up. Now, when you actually cast this, it actually is something that casts a bit like Eldritch Blast. You get 3 beams that you can use to target one enemy or multiple enemies, and it does and they all become vulnerable to poison damage if they fail the con save. So if you're fighting a boss, you can use it multiple times, meaning they have to save 3 times in a row, or if you're facing a group of enemies, you can cast it across multiple people. It's super, super important for when we actually use our poison spells, like Poison Spray, or Ray of Sickness, which please don't forget to take at level 1. I think it's because I respect and forgot to change my spells, but yes, with level 1 of Sorcerer, you want to be taking Mage Armour and Ray of Sickness. Where is my head today? So yeah, that is the build. Like I say, quite a fun one to do. I mean, if we look a bit, if we look a bit closer at the face, we definitely kind of have that witchy vibe. The whole outfit works out quite nicely in terms of our weapon combination. And yeah, I feel like you're gonna have fun with this build. Like I say, you can summon your familiars. Let's grab our imp. See, we can have a familiar like this, kind of like the little minions that the Wicked Witch of the West had, and like, you know, we have like our ability to fly as well after casting spells, so you are going to be able to fly around on your broomstick, and again, with our alchemy, you can, you know, do some potion crafting as well. If we go into the alchemy menu, you see we have all this here that we can do, so make sure you pick up plenty of recipes as you go throughout the game, and as many alchemy materials as you can. So yeah, I believe that's everything. I don't think I have anything else to really go over here. So we'll just go through the usual housekeeping shtick. In terms of yesterday's video, or the past couple of days' video, where the Zelda builds, and the kind of fiasco that happened with them, I really, really want to say that the response to the last video, the re-upload, has been absolutely overwhelming. You guys are awesome. I was really worried about uploading that video, because again, going into such serious topics towards the end there, kind of had me a bit nervous, but the fact that you guys were all super, super supportive and really understanding of the whole situation made me feel a hell of a lot better, and I super, super appreciate that. But let's move away from that now to more interesting topics. My next couple of builds, like I say, I do have my next deity build being Tiamat coming up soon, although I do have a couple of more videos that I kind of want to make first, so I'm kind of putting the deity builds on the back burner just for a little bit, just because I have some more interesting informatic things. I also have a few build requests I want to get through, since a lot more of those are coming in. So yeah, overall, lots and lots of stuff, keeping myself busy. We've got one more Halloween build next weekend, and then I've got a super special Halloween build coming out actually on Halloween itself, October the 31st? I'm forgetting my dates for some reason. Yes, October the 31st, Halloween. There is going to be a super special build coming out, and I really, really hope you guys will like that one. It's going to be a bit more experimental compared to my usual content, but I seriously do hope you enjoy that. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for me. My next episode, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm kind of doing a reverse of my usual builds, because the way I normally do my builds is I find some unique item, mechanic, class feature, subclass, whatever, and then I make a build kind of around that, or I take a concept that someone has asked me to make, and I make a build around that. I very rarely make a build around fashion. There is a specific fashion that I wanted to kind of see if I could replicate in Baldur's Gate 3, which is going to evolve into a wider build based around it. So I really do hope you look forward to that. This is going to be sort of a new thing for me, this next video that I'm going to make. That is going to be coming out on Monday. As always on the weekends, I take one day off, either the Saturday or the Sunday, depending on when I'm able to upload the current video, and we go from there. So hopefully this will work. Hopefully this next video works out, and I will see you all on Monday. So yeah, well, I've just punched my desk. Whoops. I will catch you all later.